everyone, X-Ray here, and welcome to another Red Paladin guide, this time specialized for Mythic Plus. Actually, this guide is not a single video since people CBA to watch long videos. This one you're watching is the first part of the Red PvE guide series. On the first part, I'm gonna show you best races, BIS items, talents, conduits, and legendaries. In the upcoming videos, I'll show you which covenants to choose as a red, and finally we'll have a breakdown on the burst and normal rotation both for cleave and single target on the last video. So if you don't want to miss them, make sure you
remember to like and subscribe.
Starting off with races, if you're playing Horde side, best races for reds are Blood Elves and Tauren. Blood Elves have 1% additional crit chance plus an ability to mass purge nearby enemies and return 1 holy power. Tauren have 2% additional crit damage, which is a massive boost to your burst damage if you have enough crit chance, and the ability to stun nearby enemies for 2 seconds, which is one of the must-have abilities in Mythic Plus in order to control a bunch of mobs on every pack. Personally, I would recommend Tauren for lower keys and Blood Elves for higher ones. On the Alliance side, I highly recommend you to play Red as Dark Iron Dwarf. Fireblood ability massively boosts your DPS on burst along with Avenging Wrath by granting almost same amounts of primary stat as Badge Trinket, which I'll explain on the next part. You'll also be able to move 4% faster indoors and take 1% less physical damage. Let's talk about the stat priority and BIS items. The secondary stat you want the most as a raid is mastery, and after that as much haste as you can. Some amount of versatility is also required for higher keystones in order to save yourself from getting one shot from random target uninterruptible spells. Because of the 20% crit boost on Avenging Wrath and the bursty playstyle of red, you won't need much crit, but at least 10 to 12 crit is mandatory. You may also see some top ladder reds playing Mastery Crit, and the reason behind this is they're playing Venthyr with an exceptional playstyle using Expurgation Conduits. The best trinkets to use are Insignia and Batch PvP trinkets, again because of the bursty playstyle and the 1 minute cooldown allows you to line it up with your offensive CDs once every minute or every 2 minutes. I've seen some red pallies using Ooze or Quantum Device trinkets by mistake. Red pumps way harder on primary stat buff uptime rather than secondary stats, and then Insignia trinket will boost your overall DPS when you don't have any cooldowns, and the uptime of this trinket is insanely high, around 50 to 60% of the combat time overall in dungeons. And lastly, the only weapon enchant you're gonna have would be Celestial Guidance, which randomly grants you 5% strength and has almost 35 to 55% uptime whether you're using Zeal talent or not. In the first row, Zeal is a go-to talent for Fortified weeks and Execution Sentence for Tyrannical weeks. Zeal boosts your random buff procs uptime like Celestial Guidance, Insignia Trinkets to have better overall damage on every single pack, and Execution Sentence is still a single target blaster after tons of nerf. These talents will be combined with some other conduits which I'll explain later. Also, I have to mention, since Venthyr Pallies don't have Divine Toll ability, they can't perform the Execution Sentence setup, so Tyrannical weeks, their choice will always be Zeal. On the second tier, Blade of Wrath for Tyrannical and Empyrean Power for Fortified weeks. Although Blade of Wrath is good for Fortified too, but you'll get much more benefit if you're having it on long-lasting bosses. Choosing Empyrean Power forces you to use Crusader Strike more frequently and somehow changes your AoE rotation, but it is worth it. In this tier, almost every talent is useful and good to have certain dungeons and situations, but mostly you're gonna have Fist of Justice to stop some uninterruptible casts, Repentance to sap inspiring mobs from the pack, and Blinding Light to interrupt some deadly events like the Blood Nova Worms rising in the other side dungeon or stealthing spiders in the Plaguefall dungeon. On this row, Unbreakable Spirit and Cavalier talents are both good, but as soon as you get your Lightsparding Conduit, which increases the duration of your steed, you can switch to Unbreakable Spirit in almost every dungeon. There's only one dungeon you can use Cavalier along Lightsparding, and it's the other side. Every tunnel you go through takes almost a year to pass walking without speed buffs, and This seriously affects your keystone timer because your team isn't doing the dungeon format. Your team needs you and you're probably the slowest guy ever coming out. In the next row, Divine Purpose and Seraphim are both good talents to play both for Tyrannical and Fortified weeks, but somehow Divine Purpose is the RNG form of Seraphim, which in my opinion is easier to use for newcomer reds. But Seraphim is way better if you know how to play with it. You're the only Berserk class in your team in order to shut down big pulls. Holy Avenger is a nice one too. If it didn't have 3-minute cooldown, it's just way too much. The only option you have in this tier is Healing Hands. This talent massively boosts your off heal and turns you into an off heal god. Last row, both Sanctified Wrath and Final Reckoning are good for both weeks. Sanctified Wrath for lower keys and Final Reckoning especially for higher fortified weeks. Sanctified Wrath almost turns you into a big pull eater class, causes you to deal up to 8k damage to every single mob around you every time you spend your holy power. If you're sure you're not gonna have big pulls, then Final Reckoning is a way better choice. Generally, you'll be using 2 potency conduits, 1 finesse and 1 endurance. Since Covenant and Soulbind choice explanations take much time, I'll be posting a separate video about it, but for now I'll tell you which conduits are better for specific covenants. Finesse and endurance BIS conduits are always light warding and shielding wards. One of your potency conduits can be either Witch's Command on fortified weeks or Templar's Vindication on tyrannical ones. You can also choose Expurgation instead of Templar's Vindication for Tyrannical. Your secondary potency will be Ringing Clarity or Hollow Discernment, whether you're Kyrian or Venthyr. Currently in patch 902, there are 3 legendaries that work pretty fine for red, and you have to get all of them not to underperformance every week. The first one most of you may know is the Tempest of the Lightbringer, which causes your Divine Storm to deal 20% additional damage and projectile up to 20 yards. Second one is the Mad Paragon, which increases your Hammer of Wrath damage by 30% and increases your Avenging Wrath duration by 1 second every time you cast this spell. Third one is named the Magistrate's Judgment, which causes your judgment to have at least 75% chance to give you kind of a buff that reduces cost of your next holy power spending ability by 1, which can be stacked 2 times. If you're Kyrian, then you're gonna use Tempest of the Lightbringer on fortified weeks and the Magistrate's Judgment on tyrannical ones. And if you've chosen Venthyr, Tempest of the Lightbringer for fortified and the Mad Paragon for tyrannical ones. Must also mention that you can also use the Mad Paragon on fortified weeks too if you're Venthyr, and it even helps you way more if you're going through dungeons like Theater of Pain, which has a smaller packs with higher health leader packs. So that's it, hope this guide helps you to improve. I've been pushing early this season and even managed to reach top red in my realm for a while and try to share my best experience and high red Palis builds. If you're looking for further and more specific guides, make sure you're subscribed to the channel to get notified when I post pro rotation and playstyle videos.